Hello, Pastor Steve here in Visalia, California. It is a cool spring day with a little bit of rain here. If you're not in California, you live in the Midwest or the Rocky Mountain West, I know you don't feel a bit sorry for me, and I wouldn't either, but it's long sleeve weather and we're waiting for the sunshine. So, welcome to Happy Thoughts. I do this every week, and this week we're going to begin what amounts to a several week series on the church. And I want to start this way relating to you some things that have been recurrent all of my life as a Christian and especially my life as a pastor. So, really fine people who live well and who are trustworthy and even who are passionate about their faith in God have frequently talked with me in disgruntled and unhappy tones about the church and what they have to say about the church in the form of critique and criticism is common knowledge, so I won't spend a lot of time on it. I just want to acknowledge that I'm aware of it and let you know how I respond to those things because I'm a lover of the church. So the basic criticisms are first that the church is just full of hypocrisy, right? So a bunch of people who followed Jesus, who was sweet and graceful and loving, are oftentimes guilty of gossip and pretension and everything but acting like Christ. And that's exactly right. Every church that I've ever pastored has folks like that in it, sometimes a greater proportion, sometimes a smaller proportion. I don't know. I've never heard of a church from one of the grand mega churches to a house church that doesn't have some aspect of that. It's necessarily the definition of church that a bunch of people who understand that the way that they were living on their own by their own rules or by the ways of the world have not really been successful. They begin the process, and it's a long process of trying to figure out how to turn their lives over to Christ and then how to live into the faith that they profess. I would go so far as to say, if you know a Christian who thinks they're not a hypocrite, you know a Christian who's fooling themselves. The hypocrisy is endemic in the design. If you have a place where sinners go to try to figure out how to get themselves straight with God and straight with each other, it's going to be messy and there are going to be disasters aplenty. And when people critique the church and say nothing but a bunch of hypocrites, on some level that's absolutely true. But I don't know of any institution or any group of people anywhere in the church or in other groups of whom the same thing couldn't be said. If you have to have easy pickings, look at our government, from the local government to the state government to the federal government. Hypocrisy abounds. People make promises and say things and don't follow through. But we don't give up on government. We don't say, I refuse to participate in government or to only badmouth them. I hope we don't, just because there's problems with living up to the high idealism that politicians spout off when they're running for office. You have to deal with reality. So the question about church has never been for me, is it full of hypocrisy? Oh yeah. Thank God that us hypocrites have a place to go to try to learn to do better so that we can do better. The other critique that happens is along the same lines of the church really is closed-minded, judgmental, and mean-spirited. And boy, that is true. Not so universally. Every church is full of hypocrisy, but churches that enculturate themselves in a viewpoint of demeaning others and dehumanizing others, and in the process feeling better about themselves at the expense of being graceful towards others. There are quite a few of them. They certainly exist, and I don't feel like I'm supposed to be the spokesperson that apologizes for them. It's nothing more or less than what every individual goes through at various times in our lives. We're all in situations where the path that we choose to feel better about ourselves is to think of other people who are worse than we are. That's, again, a part of humanity. It's very unfortunate when church leadership gets into that role and begins to do that in the Methodist church tradition. It happens on both the annual conference level and the general conference level. Sometimes our leadership just gets confused and thinks that we're actually a wing of a political party, and then they engage in effectively a hate campaign against people who think differently. And that's really, really unfortunate. It is a truth that oftentimes churches who go that route also find themselves in a situation where new leadership or different things correct that and tone it down a little bit, and they explore grace. At our church in Visalia, our church is really healthy. It's a beautiful place to pursue your relationship with God. And one of the things that is the hallmark of our culture right now in this stage of our existence is that we're a church that teaches grace and tries to example grace. And grace, by its very definition, means being loving towards people with whom you might have strong disagreements or who you might not even like. So we try to battle that as best we can, but the confession that certainly that exists in the church, that kind of mean-spirited judgmentalism, all that really comes down to, for me, when people talk to me about it, is you should be wise in choosing the church that you attend to. If you don't want to attend a church that's like that, then pay attention and visit lots of churches and find the church that fits your understanding of how you would like to be or what you would like to grow into. Look for evidence in the way they live. That's how I want to spend the rest of my time today and in the next couple of weeks. I want to respond to that kind of criticism of the church, again, by saying right off the bat, absolutely true. Boy, we have a lot of work to do, and we're not all that. But our belief is that we follow one who is all that, and that the process we're in, the slow, painful growth as we learn not only what it means to have our sins forgiven, but to be people who live in the grace that Jesus lived in. Boy, that's a messy, difficult process, but it's also a beautiful process. And sometimes when we see evidence of it in the church, it has the power to transform your understanding of church. So I thought what I would do is just tell a few of the most beautiful and deepest stories that have happened to me in church over the next few weeks, and insist that this is every bit as true for most people who go to church as are the criticisms. And with that in mind, maybe we'll have a more balanced picture of church. And maybe you, if you go to church and you have friends or family who criticize you for that and have the throwaway comments of a bunch of hypocrites, you'll actually be able to say, yeah, oh, okay, that's true, but there is another side to the story. So here's the first example of the other side of the story when it comes to church. For all of the things that are wrong at church, sometimes what happens in church is just sublimely beautiful. So, first story, I grew up in a pretty tough environment. My father died when I was very young, 6 years old, and our little family went to church on occasion, but that got less and less and less as my mom entered the struggle of how to support a family of 5 kids, keep the house up. It was very, very difficult for her, mourning the loss of her husband and trying to acclimate to a brand new reality, not at all the life she thought she'd be living. Church got dropped. And I think it got dropped because it was a lot of work, and B, she also felt like the church was judging her. Like every time she stepped out of line, there was condemnation, and I'm really sorry for that. As it turns out, not too long after my father's death, when the family pretty much defaulted to Christmas and Easter church attendance, the people who lived next door to us, a young couple, were going to a different church in town, and they asked Mom if it was okay to invite us kids to go, and they did. And Mom went for a little while, and my brothers and sisters went for a little while too. My memory is that I went pretty much every chance that I got because I loved that little church. Its name was Boyd Avenue Baptist Church in Casper. So what would happen is we would go to church, the next door neighbors and myself, and they would take me inside and take me down to the Sunday school room, and there I would sign in for Sunday school and go to Sunday school. And that doesn't sound remarkable, but here's what I remember that still is just a beautiful thing to me. At that time, because things were in such chaos in our family, and I was the youngest in the family, and oftentimes just tried to be invisible. Everywhere I went, I felt like no one knew me, and to a certain extent, no one really cared very much about me. Every week, when I signed into Sunday school, a couple of ladies there who I guess in retrospect were assigned to be at the table to sign you in, make sure you got your room. They were delighted to see me. They laughed and they said, "Hi, Stevie, it's great to see you." And they would give me hugs. They would make sure I had a cookie in my hand before they ushered me back to Sunday school room. I don't really remember what happened in the Sunday school room, but I remember identifying very early in my life, wow, church is a place where they care about me, where they actually know me. They remember my name from week to week, and they've never, right? They don't yell at me. They're not mad at me. They none of the things that was a part of every other part of life happened at church. Church was a really sweet place where people were kind and gracious and generous, and that was a big deal to me, right? For the rest of my childhood, and as it turns out, the rest of my life, I have always wanted to be a part of church because I've always wanted to be a part of a group of people who were just thrilled that I would be there and who genuinely loved me, even when I wasn't very lovable or the circumstances that I was coming out of weren't very lovable. So the first story of church is I have had a lifetime of showing up in church, either as a participant, a member, or even as a pastor. And it has never been the case that I've ever walked into a church where somebody wasn't available and happy to embrace me and to say hi and to ask how I'm doing, and was genuinely delighted to see me. You can't really find that anywhere else. You go to Walmart and they have greeters, and that's a nice thing, right? And you can go to your club meeting, whatever that might be, and you might have one or two good friends there who are happy to see you, but it's different. I belong to clubs and other things too. To be greeted at church by the folks who are on the same path as you are, who are delighted to see you, who love you literally with the love of the Lord, and who are so happy that you have made the decision to be with them. There's nothing else that I've ever experienced in my life anywhere close to that. And that experience and the things we'll be talking about in the next few weeks that I have experienced and seen in church, they really make a difference for me. That's how I'm able to be a pastor and a Christian who loves the church in all of its iterations, because I know a different side of the church than just what can be observed from a critical outside standpoint. So I would say to you in your life as a follower of Jesus, when people demean the church and say, right, the negative things that are true, it doesn't hurt us to say, I know it, right? That's true. But let me explain to you the other side, and to be willing to tell our stories and share our experiences and talk about even something as simple as sitting in a pew and listening to a sermon or singing a song and having a moment of revelation where you say, you know what, that's true. I can feel Christ around me, and I do feel more free or forgiven, or I do find the courage to build up my hope and to try again. We'll talk more about those kinds of stories. It'd be my delight to be able to talk about people that I've seen along the way and the ways I've experienced Christianity. It's great to talk with you. Again, cloudy day here in usually sunny California. So we're praying that we get all the rain that the farmers need and the crops need. We know our rain's coming to the Rocky Mountains and the Midwest soon, probably in the form of snow and cold temperatures. So invite people to watch Happy Thoughts with you, and I will see you next week. God bless. Thank you.